a few questions for you.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, Nadim.
Hi, Tammie.
How have you been? How's Easter been?
It's been okay. Took a few days off, but I had deadlines that I needed to meet, so I had a few days that I had to, unfortunately, do some work in. But yeah, it was fine. It was nice having, lockdowns ease, and the weather wasn't too bad, so it was nice sitting outside in the garden for a bit.
Have
What
you been
about
out
you?
for a drink yet?
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna start just easy. So, what led you to sociology? Like, how did you find a passion in sociology?
Wow, that's a very good question, and it's going to be a very long answer because it's my journey to sociology, and I do always start my first lecture, regardless of which module I teach, with the story, because my journey to sociology was quite a unique one, I think, because my background is not sociology. So I did my bachelor's degree and my master's degree in something completely different.
Oh, wow.
So I'm originally from Egypt. So in school, I remember growing up because of my family, because of my auntie and my grandmom. I was always interested in politics. I was always interested in philosophy. And I liked reading politics, and I thought, you know what, I want to study politics for my undergraduate degree. But when I was doing the equivalent of my A levels, I wasn't very good in maths. So I did very, very badly in my maths exam, which sort of affected my overall grades, which meant I couldn't apply to the university I wanted to study politics. Studying politics in Egypt, it's only very few universities that teach politics for many reasons. So it's very competitive. So I couldn't study politics in the end. So I said, okay, I might study something. I'll do economics. And I got a scholarship to study something called management technology. It's basically a fancy word for business studies. Um, a university called German University in Cairo. I said, you know what? Okay, I've got a scholarship. I can do economics modules there, and I can, later on do a master's in politics. So started uni. It was 4 years, and I found out, you know what? This is not too bad. I did well. I did well in my exams. I did well in my assignments. I was studying economics, marketing, um, human resource management, and I realized I liked human resource management. It has this human element, human development. It's not just finance, it's not just profits and all that. There was some sort of something that I found an affinity to. So I majored in that and wanted to do a master's. So I decided to do a master's in human resource management. So 2009, I came to Manchester to do my master's in the business school. I think the program was called International Human Resource Management and Comparative Industrial Relations. First few months in, I hated it. I always felt out of place. Everyone there was quite taking it seriously. They all had background in business, in consultancies, and I was just fresh out of uni. And I just didn't like it at all. I always felt out of place. People would be there wearing suits and very professional, and then I'll just show up wearing T-shirts of bands I used to like. So I did it. I finished. I graduated, and I said I'll have to take some time off. So that was 2010. I started working in a bookshop, Waterstones. I wanted to do something, and the book discount was fine, 50%. So I got lots of books, started rekindling my reading for politics and social theory. And at that time, like lots of people, I had a rock and roll dream. So I joined the band, and I was living with my bandmates, and I was using my job as to pay the bills. The uprisings happened in Egypt in January 2011. There was, you probably remember, I can't believe it's 10 years ago. There's these uprisings, Mubarak, the ex-president, fell, and questions about politics and questions about inequalities started attracting me again. and I got involved. I started getting involved in what was happening in Egypt, and I always wanted to do something about education, the politics of education. I realized we're talking about a revolution, we're talking about social movements, we're talking about political consciousness, changing society, making it, transforming things, oppression and inequalities. But lots of the discussions didn't include the role education could play in this, and I found this very interesting because we can't really, in my opinion, we can't really transform society the way we want it without transforming the education. Not only the educational system, but education, its broader meaning. And I thought, you know what, this is something I want to study. This is something I want to study. I want to see how social movements in Egypt and civil society organizations have been using education to sort of develop this political consciousness, to try and provide a different narrative of education, a different way of understanding politics and people's rights and duties than is normally found in the formal educational system. So I started my PhD in politics, and it was politics sociology. So I had one supervisor, Ian Brough, who was in politics. He was my supervisor, and Gemma Edwards in sociology was my second supervisor. That was in 2014. And this is basically how I rekindled my love for sociology and ended up doing a PhD and being a lecturer. Very long-winded, I know.
It's so interesting because in similar fashion, I found I started liking politics because of what was going on in Nigeria, because of like the corruption and everything. So but then I deviated to anthropology because I was like, because I deviated to anthropology because like it was giving me more tools to kind of explore like inequality and all of these things. I find it really interesting, like how we get to what we study. Yes.
Exactly. That's it. Like, this is the best thing about what we do. We have a personal engagement with it. It's not just something we're studying because, I found this interesting, or I did well in this subject in my A level, so I'm doing it again. No, but there is commitment to what we're doing.
Yeah, and that's what makes you stay with it, because like you just have that personal connection to it. So why did you choose Manchester? Because you said that you came to Manchester for your PhD. What brought you to Manchester? What was the...
I came to Manchester for a couple of reasons. So I came in 2009. So I'd say 3 reasons. The first reason is I've got family in Manchester. So my stepdad is from Manchester. So I had family here, his family. Second, the music scene. I was growing up, I was listening to the Smiths, I was listening to Joy Division, New Order, and there was a very vibrant music scene in Manchester. And I was back home, I was in a band, and again, I was still taking it seriously. And I thought, you know what, I'll travel, do my masters, and then maybe do something with the band. Maybe we'll become big. Of course, we never did. So I thought, okay, so I've got family there. The music scene is brilliant. And it's from what I've heard from my family, it's a great city, and the football. So that was another reason, because at that time, and still I'm interested in football. So I thought, you know what, okay, so there's a couple of things there that made me want, and a great university. If we talk about the university itself, top university, and has a very good reputation in the Middle East region. So yeah, I think that's pushed me into coming to Manchester, and I never left. So I've been here for quite a few years now.
Well, that's great. I really like the city, so I'm always talking about Manchester to everybody I know. It's just a lovely city. So moving on, so what's your favorite thing to teach in sociology? What lecture do you like go on and on and on about?
That's a very good question. Which lecture don't I like would probably be the one. But no, I think I've got a couple that I really enjoy teaching. So I teach a first-year module, Inequalities in Contemporary British Society. So that's a first semester module. And normally before, even after we went online teaching, for many students, it was the first lecture ever. You know, if they were studying maths or sociology or coming from outside the discipline, it was on a Monday morning, and this was the first ever lecture. And for me, I always loved this lecture because you can see people are still trying to figure out what is sociology. Did they make the right decision wanting to study this module or studying, you know, this discipline? So for this lecture, it's just introducing what sociology is. And I use the lecture to try and tell people, well, warn people really, that it's a commitment they have to make for the rest of their lives. You know, sociology, social sciences more generally, you know, it gives you this lens, especially sociology in my case, gives you this lens that you can't get rid of easily. It will shape how you look at the world. It will shape how you look at your experiences, the inequalities around us. So I normally have a disclaimer. It's like, if you're ready to do this, then, you know, you're doing the right thing. So that's definitely a lecture I love teaching. And thankfully, not many students drop out afterwards. So I think I don't scare them as much as I think I do. Another lecture I love teaching is in my second year module, Education and Society. One of my favorite lectures is on critical pedagogy, which I actually just recorded the lectures for because it's next week. So this is a lecture. I finish off the module by saying, right, you know, we talked about inequalities, we talked about class education and class inequalities, race and ethnicity inequalities that are based on that, gender, sexuality, age. But how can education, you know, transform these things? So this lecture is, I talk about my work, I talk about Paulo Freire, the Brazilian educator who's quite a big influence on critical pedagogy, Antonio Gramsci. So it's like, right, so how do we change things? So that's another one of my favorite lectures. And finally, I used to teach a third year module called Post-Colonial Theory and Politics, which I think you would have been interested in if it was still being delivered. And one of the lectures was on critiquing the sociological canon. So it's like, okay, sociology as a discipline has been, you know, shaped by the Industrial Revolution, by the French Revolution. It came out of these many societal changes. So it has this quite a Eurocentric perspective. And how do we, you know, decolonize it? How do we think about sociology, you know, from a different angle? So it was a lecture that sort of says, right, you know, have you heard of Du Bois, for example? You hear Marx, Weber, Durkheim, but people, we rarely hear about William Du Bois and his influence on sociology, or Ibn Khaldun, the 14th century North African thinker who you know, was quite influential in how we look at society. So that's, yeah, I think these three lectures are my absolute favorites. And of course, all of the others are, I love teaching them, but I think these three are always the key highlights of each module.
That's so interesting. I wish I had gotten that warning. I think I finally understood how much of a sociology person I was. I was watching Divergent one day and I was just thinking about Marx and Durkheim, and I was like, I'm in a tunnel. It was really funny.
Yeah, that's it. And this is exactly the best thing about you know, the degree you're doing. It's giving opportunities to choose modules that you wouldn't normally choose. So there's this flexibility, and I'm glad to hear that you're employing it
in my everyday life. And Divergent watching. So what do you think sociology brings to the rest of the social sciences? What special qualities do you think it just uses to tie up?
I think for sociology, and I always, this is again part of my the first lecture that I used to scare students. It's sociology for me it's a myth busting discipline. It pushes people to rethink lots of things we've taken for granted for such a long time, especially in terms of inequalities. So, you know, things that we faced, inequalities that exist, education inequalities, pay inequalities, gender pay gaps, all these inequalities, many of us tend to just accept them as they are. We don't really question them. Some of us think it's natural. This is how life is. This is how the economy is. But sociology always has this lens that pushes you to always try and bust these myths we've taken for granted for such a long time. And it always, for me, this is it. It pushes us into thinking about things differently. And definitely the case for me. When I'm teaching, I tell students the most important thing is, after you finish this module, is that some of your things you've taken for granted, or beliefs that you've thought were correct this entire time, you may now think about them differently, especially in my education and society module. Because lots of students say, I never really enjoyed school. Why didn't you enjoy school? Because I never really fit in. Why didn't you fit in? And then when you start sort of untangling, this narrative, there's so many structural issues that some students have faced that made their schooling experience not the best one. Experiences that have been shaped by their class background, by their gender, by their racial and ethnic backgrounds. So for me, this is one important thing sociology brings in, pushes us to always question, always critique things that we've taken for granted, and to try and make things a bit better.
Yeah, it really does do that. So next question I'll ask is, so what are you currently working on? Any topics or any magazines or reports, research articles you're working on?
Actually, speaking of this is very topical, because I just submitted a book proposal today to build on the work I've done on my PhD, which is on using education as a method of resistance. So that's going to be something I've always wanted to work on. I've published a few papers on those, trying to rethink resistance in Egypt, trying to see how education could be used as a social movement, or an integral part of contesting authoritarianism. So so that book, I want to expand on these themes. And because up till now, after the uprisings and after everything that's been happening in the Middle East, the same questions I'm still asking, or asked when I was doing my PhD, they're still topical now, because again, people are not paying enough attention to it. So I decided, right, enough is enough. I'm going to, finally write this book I've wanted to write. So that's a book proposal I submitted. So we'll see what they think about it. Another thing I'm working on at the moment, it's a paper on the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. So it's a bit different from what I normally do, but I'm trying to critique some of the frameworks that have been used to analyze the Muslim Brotherhood as an organization in Egypt. So mostly I'm doing it from a Gramscian perspective. So that's an ongoing paper that seems to never want to end, but it's getting there. And there's a book chapter related to this that I'm working on. But I think these are the things I'm currently working on at the moment. Still related to what I've always wanted to do, but sort of taking a different angle now.
Look forward to hearing more about that book. Sounds really, really interesting. So my last question for you is, do you have any books or shows that you would like to recommend for students to watch?
Ooh.
Since we are in we're not in lockdown anymore, but we're all at home.
Yeah, right. Okay. So I've been recently binge watching Frasier, that 90s sitcom, because I've always liked it when I was growing up, and then I found out there's nothing else happening on telly. So I'm binge watching Frasier, and it's still funny. I still find it funny. So Frasier is something I'm watching now. I don't watch telly as much, to be honest. I was thinking, I know Parks and Rec was another sitcom I enjoyed. Parks and Rec was another. It's a good lockdown sitcom, I think. So Frasier, Parks and Rec. And I like watching sports, and I will make use of this interview to talk about rugby league. So there's a big, I love football, but I actually love rugby league. And not many students, especially if they come outside of the Northwest or Yorkshire, people normally assume rugby is rugby union, which is what people watch on telly and Six Nations. But there's also another a version of it called rugby league, which is a different code that's mostly located in the Northwest and Yorkshire. So I like watching anything that has to do with rugby league. The season is on now, so there's games later today, which I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I've been mostly watching rugby league stuff. Books, I've been reading John le Carrier, the gentleman who wrote spy novels in the 60s, and he just passed away a couple of months ago. So I decided to start reading all his books. So I'm now currently going through his books. And yeah, I don't know if students enjoy spy novels or like, not everyone, I don't think it'll be to everyone's taste. But yeah, John le Carrier is my author of choice at the moment. What about you? Do you have any things to recommend?
Well, I'm not the best because I'm currently just like binge watching Bridgerton again. I watched it before, I'm watching it again. I don't know why, but yes, and I'm just like rereading a novel actually, Girl, Woman, Other, by Bernardine Evans. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I don't want to butcher it, but yes, I'm reading it. So I'm just watching stuff I already watched before, just because it's the ease of it. So
that's it, isn't it? Sometimes you have lots of options available. You just that's it. That's why I'm binge watching things I've watched back in the day. But Bridgerton, they're going to have another few seasons, aren't they? I think they renewed it for another few seasons. This is something I'm trying to avoid watching. When you have the feelings like, oh, I might actually like watching this. So I'm trying to avoid watching it.
I think I would like it because it's very not critical, but like it's just easy to watch, and it's easy on the eye.
But that's another thing. Actually, I did tell students about, if they have this lens, this sociological lens, or even if you're doing anthropology or something from the BAS degree, there's this lens that will ruin things you watch. So things that you've enjoyed watching growing up, you watch it with this, new perspective, and then you realize, oh my God, what's happening here? And this ruined for me Big Bang Theory because of how they portrayed Raj. So at that time, it's like, oh, this is funny, haha. But then when I looked at issues of stereotypes and racial stereotypes and how they've portrayed Raj, it's like, oh my God, this is so problematic. And this is something I use in my lecture on race and representation. I use Big Bang Theory, and many students do tend to find it funny. But then, thankfully, now when I ask what's problematic and how it's portrayed, and nearly everyone does say how it's portraying Raj. And The Simpsons, the sociological lens also ruined my liking for The Simpsons because, again, the stereotypes. Yeah. And Hank Azaria has recently apologized, hasn't he? So it's like, so now people are slowly realizing, yes, there are problematic aspects of popular culture. And if people, like us and social scientists, critical thinkers more generally didn't, critique, then when will we?
Very true. Well, thank you so much for coming, and it was a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed it, and it was something I was looking forward to the entire week. So I'm so happy, and it's a great idea. And because BAS, you're doing such a fantastic degree, and probably the advice I'd give is to try and make use of the options you've got. Try and choose modules that you normally wouldn't go for, but try and expand your horizons and see what's there, because it's such a great degree, and hopefully next year when things are back to some sort of normality and lectures are back again, there'll be more opportunities to discuss and see how social sciences could make the world a better place. Slowly but steadily. We have to end on a positive note.
Very true.